Good afternoon. Thank you for being there to this session, the GNF session on space supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I am Isabelle Duvaux-Béchon. I am in charge of Member State Relations and Partnerships Office in the European Space Agency. And we do this GNF session in cooperation with the Space Generation Advisory Council. So I have, it's in the stream of diversity. So we have some diversity here from different continents, different age, different gender.
Different age, I take it, yeah.
Yeah, I take it also, you know, I'm, okay. We have in the order next to me, so Ganyo Ishola Akbaje, who is the Executive Director of the African Regional Center for Space Science and Technology Education in Nigeria, so for English-speaking countries of Africa. Chris Lee, who is the Chief Scientist of the UK's Space Agency, and that has a lot of activities in the SDGs, even. Shirish Ravan, who is from the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, and working in particular with Asia and Pacific regions, but many other activities. Davide Petrillo is from the Space Generation Advisory Council, so he's the young alibi of the session. And what's important and interesting is that he will become the manager for the organization of SGAC activities for the next IAC in Dubai, and that I've learned 2 days ago that they won't put the emphasis on sustainable development and corporate social responsibility for their events, so it's important that he's there. And Jan Werner, my boss, happens to be Director General of the European Space Agency. And another type of diversity because he's a civil engineer by training, which is something different from the others, but quite useful for Moon Village and other activities. So just I have one or two, see if it works. Should go to the next. Yeah. Okay. So you all know, of course, the SDGs. I mean, somebody who'd never seen that chart was not on Earth since for the last 3 years. So I will not enter into detail because I'm sure some others will mention that. They were adopted in September 2015, and they have to be reached by 2030, which is in 10 years from now. So it's not so, we do not have a lot of time. We know that space can help measure and achieve the goals. But is it known? And how can we help to make it better known? And what can you do and what can you do, the panel? But what can we do together? Because everybody can have a role there. The open questions, so some might be answered by some of the panelists, some might not. Some might come from you later, but it is what I identified as being the thing that could be important. Of course, how you address the SDG, I mean, that you have an understanding of what is being done and what is proposed, what is needed to go further, and how to pass the information, because I think one of the main things that is missing today is how to pass the information, how to make it known what is being done and how it can be used and by whom. And also discussing a bit about cooperation between us, between your organization, what you represent, so that it goes further. So that's enough for me. This is the back screen of the technician behind. So I will give the floor to Ganyo, who don't have any slides, so you can.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for making me part of this panel, because when you look at the big box over here, I think I'm the second youngest guy around. First, we thank God for the whole world, the head of state coming together and thinking about solving a global problem, starting from the MDGs. There is need to sustain the herd. So many things are happening. The solution being proffered, all agree that you need clearly skills in space science and technology education. development in one part of the world is not the same in other part of the world. Sustainability depends on so many factors. Just less than 10 years or 10 years about, can we get, especially developing countries, to the level in which these goals are achieved? Just like the Sendai framework, I think nations should domesticate this agenda. Domesticating it may not be enough. We should help each other to monitor what you say or your road or your path to achieving it. So we should be monitoring each other at regional level, at continental level, and various levels. Because it's very important. If this were not achieved, we have issues. But very much key to this is the issue of skill acquisition in utilizing the available opportunities. And one of the success stories of UNOSA is the establishment of regional centers, which has been doing a lot, but more still need to be done in terms of channeling skills, intervention to member states based on collaboration and partnership. And if those centers are used as hubs, it will be easy to pass it on to so many other academic institutions and collaboration hook onto this. It is very important. One of the things that is missing is the issue of communication, creation of awareness, outreach. In most of these countries, yes, the awareness varies. Especially in the developing countries, a lot needs to be spent on communication. The awareness of why are we using space, why is space relevant, and how do we really solve the problem through indigenous capacity building. I believe this will go a long way. There is a lot in terms of partnership collaboration from continent to continent, but you need to do intra-regions, intercontinental interaction. I think that's missing a lot, especially in the African continent. If this is done, we exchange ideas. That's the only way we can domesticate and own the program and then try to sustain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Genyo. We will come back to some of the points you mentioned, but we'll continue let's say, the introductory remarks. Chris, point of view, yeah. You can take it or do it from here.
I'm one of the older ones, so I'll sit down. Like others have said, it's a great pleasure to be able to be here and to see a session dedicated to looking at how we can support SDGs. It's a very important topic, as hopefully this panel will describe with you. I've had an opportunity to have a couple of talks already during the last few days, and so some of my remarks may already be well known to you. However, let me first admit it here again in this Congress here. When I grew up, I was a child of Apollo. I saw the landing. I'm old enough, certainly, to have seen the landing. I never wanted to be an astronaut. Let me say that again at this Congress. I never wanted to be an astronaut. What I wanted to do was to understand more about the worlds on which the astronauts might be walking on. And in particular, this image is the one that inspired myself and probably a generation of us involved in environmental activism, because we saw for the first time in a very clear way how fragile the Earth is. And we also realized, I think more clearly than perhaps was realized, that space is not just a destination, a race. It's also a location. It's a location that can do something useful. Whether we like it or not, space is still an expensive activity, and to earn its seat at the table of financial ministries, it cannot just be about inspiration, it must also be able to show work, and it must be able to assist in protection. So this was the image that inspired us, and certainly we've seen satellites ring the Earth, providing Earth observation data, weather data, navigational data, up to the current time. But one thing that's always struck us is that governments themselves are not always very good at taking the full advantage of what satellites can do. Commercial companies have come along, telecommunications in particular is the big star, but governments themselves, certainly my own government, was not a regular and active user of satellite data. What we set out in 2010 in the UK Space Agency was a slightly new calibration of our space sector, and that was to focus a little bit more on space for smarter government. We wanted to show government that we were a service. We weren't just necessarily there to spend money. Politicians often tell me that space is very cool, but it's a great way to spend money. We wanted to show them it's a great way that they can save money as well. During that exercise, we became acutely aware that there were many nations around the world who were just not plugged into the so-called satellite-enabled world. And part of the reason was that they were just simply nervous about what space could or could not deliver. I'm also very fortunate that I come from a country that has made a strong commitment to sustainable development and overseas development assistance. Our government spends 0.7% GDP every year on that initiative. And I was able in 2016 to persuade the government to put some of that money aside to show how we might demonstrate satellites as part of smarter government for those governments outside the UK. It's not an aid program. It's a program where we are trying to show best practice and show governments how they can take benefit from satellites, but it's also to demonstrate the fact that the satellite services are sustainable, and sustainable in the sense that we can walk away from the program after 5 years and know that they will continue to proceed through some mechanism or other. We're spending £30 million per year on that program, which makes it the largest type program in the world. But that actually is an indictment. When you think about how much money has been spent on satellite systems, to realize that we are the world's largest provider of such demonstration services is a real pity. We have so much data that we can showcase. We have growing experience to share with our neighbors around the world. It seems such a pity we're not able to do more in that regard. We work with over 40 countries in that process, but it is not a UK delivery program. It is driven by the end user governments. They identify the particular issues and the challenges that they face. We bring together teams that are able to show how space might work. Sometimes we show how space doesn't work. One of the problems we have in our own community is space thinks it's more important than it perhaps often is in the delivery of these downstream activities. And there's a bit of learning on both sides of the program as we each understand each other's problems. One of our real challenges, as we've identified, is that the end users that we work with in other government organizations are civil servants. They're not space trained, they're not even necessarily scientifically trained, and we need to do more to encourage them to be more confident in what we can and what we cannot do. And I think this is one of the roadblocks we have at the moment, and it's something we're looking to change in our next program activities. To give you some highlights, we are 3 years into the 5-year program. Our programs have to be substantial and impactful. Our projects are typically £5 million plus matched funding contributions from the other governments and the other partners in the program. But I have to tell you, I've had the opportunity to work on space missions for many years now. I've been involved in Mars missions and Hubble Space Telescope. But having met people whose lives have actually been saved by projects that we have implemented, I think it changes you. It changes you to appreciate what space can and cannot achieve. For some reason, I've now gone back to the... Oh, seems to be going back. Oh, is there a refresh of the screen or something?
Yeah. You want the slides back, right?
Ah, there we go. Can we go forward again? Onto the slides, please. Okay, well, let me continue without the slide then. What we really want to do was show that, thank you, is that we've had some impact. And as I said, when you've actually met people who've had their lives saved, you begin to realize where priorities might actually need to lie in some governments. So we've certainly been involved in perhaps just a couple of highlights there. Our satellite systems are currently working with South Africa, where we have over 900 artisanal fishing vessels now locked into a very low-cost AIS system. We've been working with SAMSA, the maritime organization in South Africa, to be involved in 5 rescue events where 45 fishermen were saved. We've certainly helped the Malaysian government in identifying where oil spills took place in the Straits of Malacca, allowing us to actually identify both the oil and the ship responsible for it. But also working more sustainably in forestry, where over 6 countries are being monitored using our systems in our partner organizations, and we've saved over 300,000 hectares of forests from deforestation. And finally, we've been working with students to show how satellite information can offer content. The satellite part of these solutions is a very small part of these solutions. It is simply a layer in the overall activity, and part of the sharing experience is realizing just where those added areas can make most impact. The program will continue, we hope, for another 2 years, whereafter we will then ask for a further 5-year extension. Fundamental to all of this is to have somebody involved in the program who is a critical advisor, who is not a space evangelist, who measures whether the satellite role was genuine, true, and offers value. 20% of our program is therefore spent on an independent organization who evaluates all the activities to ensure that we are robust and secure in the delivery of the sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. This is really a model of what can be done that is very interesting to follow. Forestry, you like that, Shirisha? You have a doctorate in forest ecology. Okay, your turn, yeah, you can go there. Yeah, but you have to take the...
Thank you. So you left your talk with the subject that is very close to my heart, forest ecology, biodiversity. I'll be talking a bit about role of United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs in promoting use of space technologies in sustainable development. I hope most of you know about this office. The vision is to bring benefits of space to humankind. United Nations has adopted these sustainable development goals as an instrument to achieve sustainability in next 10 years. We are left with next 10 years, as Isabella said. And one of the most important thing here is data revolution. If you see the magnitude of these sustainable development goals, the universality, right from international, national, regional to local level, even as an individual, one can contribute into sustainable development goals on daily basis. Integration is another thing that you cannot achieve one development goal without achieving another one. So they're all interlinked and have to be achieved simultaneously. And then transformation, it really aims at transforming making really big transformation in the world. And when we think of this magnitude, then important thing, should be data-driven. And this is the difference between Millennium Development Goals until 2015 we talked about, and what is after 2015 Sustainable Development Goals is all about data revolution, using data for achieving the targets, 169 targets and 232 indicators that monitor these targets of Sustainable Development Goals. And there's one study which is done by, of course, European Space Agency. It says almost all Sustainable Development Goals can be addressed with space. Only 4 that are indirectly, but all goals have direct link to the space technologies. What we have today is a 50 years of accumulated knowledge of Earth systems about atmosphere, land, oceans, and ice coverage. Now, why I am bringing this 50 years of thing? Because if countries have to demonstrate what was the situation before 2015, what they achieved as a part of Sustainable Development Goals, they need a baseline data for before and after. And That's why it is important to see. So here is one example I'm bringing. This is from Nepal. It's the International Center for Integrated Mountain Research, which is a support office for our program, UNOSA program. If you see, there's one village here down, which has a threat from the glacial lake. If the lake bursts, the village will go away. And they have been monitoring this from uh, 50 years before there was a data from Corona, which has become freely available. And then until now, they have been monitoring. And this is a great example of seeing how space is providing the baseline data and how from 50 years back until now you can come and keep monitoring the situation so that resilience is built in the communities. So it's all about Earth observation, global navigation, satellite systems, and we need integration of all these technologies to achieve sustainable development goals. And to do that, we have launched several programs, and director of one of our regional centers spoke first that we have 6 such regional centers that is contributing to Sustainable Development Goal 4, that is quality education. What is the difference between these centers and universities is the people on job from developing countries can go there and take education and go back to their countries and launch operational programs, which is not possible with the universities. So this is a great initiative. We have space for youth also. Then gender equality, we have space for women programs so that we see that gender inclusiveness need to be ensured while we talk about sustainable development goals. We have one program called UN Spider, which is all about building resilience in the countries and promoting disaster risk reduction and helping emergency response contribute to Sustainable Development Goal 11, and the newly launched Space Climate Observatory, which is a new program. We are cooperating with that, and it talks about Sustainable Development Goal 13, climate change. There's something we have launched, it's called Access to Space for All. It's space is emerging so fast, technologies are developing, and a lot of emerging space countries are lagging behind in the race. So this particular program cooperates with best space agencies in the world, also some big corporate companies in the space, and we are offering different possibilities for developing countries to work with those programs. Free of cost, they can access those kind of resources so that we make sure that those countries don't lag behind. They get access to state-of-art technologies and they can conduct their experiments. So likewise, we keep on contributing, and recently, just 3 days before IAC started, we conducted a workshop, and we used the word inclusiveness here just to make sure that we include everyone in space programs. So we had 110 participants, almost 50% participation of male and female, which is quite a striking thing here. We had a high-level panel. What we talked about is inclusiveness, mobilizing everyone, opportunities for emerging countries, space exploration for everyone, and developing collaboration. So this is what our aim was. And through the programs like Space for Sustainable Development, Space for Youth, Space for Women, we are contributing to Sustainable Development Goals. This workshop provided new perspective to space agencies, emerging nations, and startups, that inclusivity is important factor, and also inclusivity of gender, people of color, disability, everyone should be taken along, and this new perspective was really reinforced during our workshop. And high-level panel also gave a message that we are left with only 10 years to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, and space can do much more really. Why I'm saying this? There was a political forum last July, and it identified that not all Sustainable Development Goals are doing well. They are struggling, and this is a big concern. And if space can address this in a big way, I think we can contribute to this particular concern that has been raised through the political forum 2019 on sustainable development. I think space has a very good role to do that. So we put this workshop on timely manner, and then we're contributing to this particular initiative of achieving sustainable development goals. So thank you.
Thank you, Shirish. Now we go to Davide, so the real young one, young not only in mind, because we are all young in mind, but the one who visibly has a few, what is visible is that he was not there when the Apollo landing. This is clear. Davide.
He's got too much hair.
Yeah, he's got too much hair, yeah, okay. But some keep their hairs even after a few years, huh? David.
Thank you, Isabel, for the introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Davide, and I'm here representing the Space Generation Advisory Council as the next Space Generation Congress Manager for Dubai next year in October. So before talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, I would like just to give you an overview of what SGAC is. In particular, SGAC is a non-profit organization whose main objective is to raise the voice of the young students and the young professionals from 18 to 35 years old regarding space-related activities to the UN as well as industries and agencies. How do we do it? We do it in different ways. For example, we have local, regional, and global events around the world, as well as we have 10 different project groups talking about different topics like space medicine, space for space exploration, as well as space in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. And also we provide more than 140 scholarships to attend these different events around the world. So, talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, last week when I was at the Space Generation Congress, there was a question that I asked that got me curious. So I would like to ask you the same question to make it also a bit more interactive. So, from your side, how many of you are aware about the Sustainable Development Goals? So, you can just raise your hand. Almost everyone.
This is why they are coming, because they know that it is interesting.
And now I have the second question. How many of you are aware on how to put them in practice into space technologies or into the daily life? You see, this is the answer that we were looking for. So we see that there were less people that were raising their hands, and this was the same answer that we got at the Space Generation Congress. So this is what we want to show you, and also how we put in practice the Sustainable Development Goals within the SGAC. So, in particular, in the past, we started with the UNOSA, we signed an agreement with them, and we, in support of the Space 2030 agenda, we started with this competition called Space for Youth, and it was a competition to raise the voice of the young people, to provide them awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as to provide them a platform and opportunity to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Another opportunity, another activity that we did was last Sunday here at the IAC. We did an hackathon called Space for Earth, and here at 12 it was an opportunity for 30 delegates and lots of different experts talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and also creating ideas, possible projects, and of course giving mentorship opportunities to our young professionals talking about the Sustainable Development Goals and how they can implement them into the space activities and technologies. Another important activity that we are doing at the SGAC are the so-called working groups. So during our regional and global events, we provide the opportunity to our delegates to talk about a specific topic in which delegates discuss and provide a recommendation at the end of the event. And in particular, at the last Space Generation Congress in Washington, we had a specific working group called Special Track, in which we provided to our delegates different inputs from lots of experts. We had more than 12 experts from different perspectives, from governments, industries, academia, non-profit organizations, to provide awareness about the Sustainable Development Goals and also to receive recommendations on how we can implement them within the space applications. Also, what are the future activities then that we would like to implement within the SGAC? Within the SGAC, we would like to implement this first strategy called Our Giant Leap. So we will focus most of our events on the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, that is the goal of the gender equity. So we would like to include, to have much more women inside our events, as well as we want to inspire them and find solutions for attraction and provide a representativity of women in the space sector. Last but not the least, as I said before, next year I will be in charge of managing the Space Generation Congress in Dubai, and this will be the first SGAC event completely sustainable. So this means that we will have a Congress completely plastic-free. We will also talk about absolutely no water bottles in plastic. We will provide water bottles, so you will have to bring your water bottles because we will have the dispenser with the water. Reduction of food waste, reduction of water waste. We will also try to reach the gender equity 50-50 male and female. And of course, the objective is to provide awareness to our delegates and also to make them understand how we put them in practice. So this was my presentation for the Space Generation Advisory Council, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Davide. So, Jan, the view of ESA, or your view?
Thank you very much, Isabel, and also I would like to see my presentation. I hope it is working. So far it is not coming, but I'm sure it will be in a minute
in a second. So SDGs, as everybody of you also said, you know them, so this is very important. And now it's a question how we are really looking to them. And I selected just a few examples, and the first thing is I took that picture I like most of our Earth. And this is, of course, the Earth is over there. That's the Earth, and we know that the Earth is endangered, and therefore I think this is reason enough to look for the SDGs. And the SDGs normally are always these 17 SDGs, and I have always some discussion when I change it, because everybody is telling me you are not allowed to change it because these are the goals and there is no possibility to change it. But I believe more and more that I was right when some 10 years or 9 years ago, when was I really formulated? 2015? So 4 years, and I changed it 3 years ago, adding here the migration issue to that, because I think migration is something we have to face and we have to see. So what is space delivering? And space is really in all of the fields, so very simple. Space can deliver things in all of that. I will right now go only to 3 examples. So climate action, to quality education, to peace, justice, and institutions, to show that space can really deliver something, and we at ESA, we are eager to do so. Let's start with climate change. That's the obvious one. By using Earth observation, we can control, or we can measure more than 50% of all the climate change relevant variables. So it's only done by space, so therefore we can raise awareness, we can observe, we can give hints, but we can also do something against climate change. For instance, when we are using modern technology of satellite navigation and communication to optimize the air traffic routes in an ecologic way. The second example is about peace and justice. It was in 2014 when the Crimea conflict started. And at that time I was invited for a launch of an astronaut to Baikonur. And I was really shocked, and I was afraid that this Crimea conflict will disturb all of these space activities. But then I came to Baikonur and saw this picture. And therefore this picture is for me an example that space can bridge earthly crisis. And I hope that we do whatever we can that space is and has this bridging nature also in the future. You see here a European astronaut, a Russian cosmonaut, and an American astronaut. And it's still in a comfortable situation. Later on in the Soyuz, they are much closer to each other. And it's working, so space is bridging earthly crisis, and with space we can raise awareness, especially also through astronauts. And the third example is quality education and inspiration. And this is really done by astronauts when they talk to the young generation, and you see it here in the face of the small one, how inspired he is already at that point. And inspiration is the basis for a lot. So fascination is the basis. Inspiration is already something which happens in our brain. And from inspiration to motivation, it's a small step for mankind, but a giant leap for humanity. And this is what I think is really important, because we need motivated people for the future, to be prepared for the future, to work on the future, and therefore I think we can do with space a lot of things beyond direct aspects, also from a societal point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you to you. So now we have time for questions. I have a certain number of questions, but I would prefer first to start with you, whether you have questions. There are microphones here, so please raise your hand. First row, Aaron.
Yes, thank you all for presenting.
If you can introduce yourself, just that we know who you are.
Yes, Joost van Oorschot from Mana Electric. I just wanted to ask, could you maybe also speak more on the technology transfer aspects and how some of the space technologies and how we transfer those back into the terrestrial industry, how that is also helping on the Sustainable Development Goals? Because I think we talk a lot about Earth observation and GNS, but not so much about tech transfer.
Yes, Jan.
I can give you several examples. It's a full afternoon.
But maybe just one example. So on the daily use of humans of water in the industry nations is about 100 liter. On the International Space Station we have 5 liter per day. So that shows that this technology, bringing back to Earth, can really save a lot of water, and that's very important. So this is just one example, but another example, for instance, also when you are looking to solar panels. The solar panels were developed in space. I take now only trivial examples, but now we know that this is also part of the future energy we are using. So therefore, it's about the efficiency is still the best with these solar panels which were developed for space. And I can give you hundreds of examples. So we are trying to do this in ESA in a structured way. We have, first of all, a technology transfer office, number one. We have now created a downstream gateway, which is there to have an access also to the non-space sector to get the information from the space sector. And we have what is called the business incubation centers. We especially look for young entrepreneurs, either directly in the space sector or using space activities, space results to transfer them to other areas. So there are a lot of these transfer possibilities, and ESA tries to do it.
Chris?
Yeah, I'd like to take a different line. I think the way you asked the question is sort of like, oh, well, you know, Earth observation and GNSS, that's easy. Let's talk about space technology transfer, and you immediately assume upstream examples. I believe that the downstream is actually a technology, and what we find in the work that we are doing is that the end users are just simply not confident in the use of geographic information or satellite telecommunications, and that's a genuine technology transfer. One of the things I've said in the past is the bottlenecks we find is such that we need more software data miners than asteroid miners, and we've talked about that one. Because there is just simply not the skill sets in many of these countries to feel confident. So we are transferring technology, it's software technology activities, and I think that's as legitimate as the hardware we put in space.
Ganyu, yeah, I think you are missing also, you were mentioning that.
Yes. Yeah. When we look at it, it's very important that whoever needs to be involved in SDGs need to acquire skill. It's not enough to just say transfer of technology. You must know the basic principles, how it evolved. Then, from there, you can come up with your own innovative way of doing certain things in the context in which you are operating it. There are certain things that brings it to it, the environment in which you are operating it, the political situation where it has been adopted. This all comes in. And because we have issues that will make it work better in certain contexts, in certain areas. Take, for example, the issue of availability of simple electricity, internet access. What I can run here in particular lab may not be the same way I will be able to run it in Africa, for example. So, but what is important is how do you adapt whatever you've learned or the principle, the skill you've acquired to your situation. I think that's what is most important. Thank you. And that's why centers like ours, we are saying, link up with the industries, bring the technology or the skill, we unwrap it, we push it across to our students, they will play around with in the context of their own environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Davide, in your hackathon last week, what was the role of technology, or no role of technology, in your hackathon last week, the Space for Earth hackathon? Were you working on technologies or just on data?
So we were working on different topics, honestly. So we were talking about technologies. We were working also about, again, providing awareness about the SDGs, because so far we realized that lots of young professionals and students are not aware of what the Sustainable Development Goals are. So this is what the experts, these were the expertise that the experts were providing to our students and to our young professionals. So they were starting first from providing awareness, and after that, once they realized what were the Sustainable Development Goals, then they started to put in practice also from an educational perspective what the Sustainable Development Goals are.
Yeah.
I was part of this hackathon presenting.
Okay, so tell us the view of the expert.
Sustainable Development Goals, and the message that we discussed there is technology is developing in very advanced pace, but every development has to be aligned to three important frameworks: Sustainable Development Goals, Climate Change Agreement, and Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. That was the thing. And my personal experience, having visited so many developing countries and working with governments for many years, establishing relationships, it's not really about technology awareness and skills. This is happening in a big way. But if there is no enabling policy environment in the country, then forget about technology transfer. Even the data exchange doesn't happen between the departments. And this is the big thing that we are working with every country to develop a policy environment, coordination systems within the government, and then of course this capacity building, continuous skill building. I think then only we see. And wherever the institutions are stable and people are there to champion the cause, that's where we saw technology transfer is happening. And in the country where people are changing, government is changing continuously, we see after 2 years, again we are back to zero, then we start again. This is the one biggest trouble. Yeah.
I have to come back because I tried to make a point, but obviously I failed. Technology transfer is one thing. Knowledge, education is one thing. Use the knowledge is one thing. But all of this is not enough from my point of view. And therefore, I used this last picture with Tim Peake, because the people must have a motivation to do something out of that. It's not enough that I know something or whatever, or that I have a technology available. If I'm not motivated, then it's nothing. And therefore, I believe that really what space can deliver, you can call it transfer or whatever, I don't know how you call it, but what it can really deliver is fascination. Everybody was fascinated who was in my age, seeing the astronauts on the surface of the moon, and different to Chris, I wanted to become an astronaut, but I failed. But anyhow, I wanted to become an astronaut. But both of us were fascinated, that's for sure. So fascination is something which happens in our head, which is a good way, because it's a positive movement. If you come out of fascination to inspiration and saying, okay, somebody did something, so to understand that somebody did something, maybe I can also do something. This is the second step of a positive move in your brain. And the third one is, yes, now I'm motivated to do something. And I think this is so important, because if you look around, I'm always seeing that this part of human life is the one which is missing most. People are not motivated really, and I think this is something we should take care of. I'm in favor of technology transfer, I'm in favor of education, I'm in favor of knowledge transfer, all of this, but we have also to look to inspire people to be motivated.
Yeah, and seeing the positive way, acting the positive way. Chris, on the question of motivating the government to do something, and your government or the other government, because it's linked to what was said also, and what you faced with the implementation of your program.
Yeah, motivation is definitely a key issue, but when you're sitting across the floor from a Treasury Minister, motivation isn't really the same topic. Governments, by their very nature, tend to be a little bit short-term unless there's a particular pressure from the community, because, of course, at the end of the day, there's votes. What we've always had in the UK is perhaps a bit of a utilitarian view of space. I mean, the view is it's useful or it's not. If it's not useful, we'll build some ships. There are other things we can do. We're not so much connected to, putting the flag on a planet. Clearly, we recognise that space is motivational. But as I said earlier on, ministers tend to think about it's motivational, but it's expensive. And we need to change the dynamics of the relationship. And so what we had to do in our presentations to government was to demonstrate that it was relevant. And that was the key message for us. It can be inspirational, but it must be relevant. We face a lot of pressures at the moment, and actually I see many agencies are still thinking about the 20th century moonshot programs as opposed to the 21st century moonshot program. And the 21st century moonshot program may well reflect more like the Greta Thunberg sort of analysis. It's a little bit frightening, it's a little bit negative, it's about climate change and fear, but it's also inspirational for a community of young activists who see the opportunity to make a difference. And so the question of relevance becomes important. What are we doing that is relevant to that story? Space is an easy win, believe me. I mean, with the climate change activities that ESA are doing, for example, they demonstrate exactly what space can bring. But we still have to bring it down to how those programs deliver impact. And that gets down to somebody has to fund in some way the development of services that then become mainstream in government. When governments start using satellite data, they become less threatened by giving budgets to space agencies. So part of our whole process is to demonstrate to them that they will have impact by results, financial results, economic results, social benefits through soft power with government interactions, but also with citizen support. So the process that we had in the UK was to build an argument around the short term, to build it around delivery of information services, and to show how that these were all fundamentally sustainable.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Is there another question? Yes?
Hi, my name is Gavin. I'm from the University of Sydney, and I have actually two questions. So first question will be, in how many years do all you panelists think machine learning will replace research completely? And part two of the question is, how do you see emerging bioengineering technologies such as genetically modified bacteria, viruses, or nanobots that are airborne can solve climate change by consuming carbon dioxide? Thank you.
Does any of you have an idea on that? I don't have.
Concerning the machine learning?
Machine learning?
I think that this will really take very, very long. I know that artificial intelligence and all of this looks like very promising, but it's also clear that the human brain today is not the same human brain as 2,000 years ago. So there's also a development. So therefore, I think this is a race in brain. And I hope that the humans will always win. The second question is, of course, a very interesting question, but also, so I would not dare to give an answer, because to repair all our mistakes by doing another mistake is dangerous. Huh? It's not just trivial, so I don't dare to answer that part.
I mean, there already is a brilliant device that removes carbon dioxide from the air, and it's very easy. It's called a tree. I don't think we necessarily need to do biological engineering.
Okay. Thank you. Is there? Yes? Just.
Hello. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much to everyone on stage for participating in this event. It's a topic I really believe in, and it's enlightening to hear your thoughts. So I am a regulatory specialist at a startup called LeafSpace, providing ground segment services. And so my question concerns the commercial end of all of this. And what I'm interested to know is there a guide or a source of information that I can circulate to my company's clients, which are the satellite operators, to explain them really clearly, these are the institutions or other companies or agencies which could use your data for development purposes. And why should you sell it to them? Or why should you donate it? What can you get out of it? And which also provides a rationale, why it's a good thing to do. Because many of our clients are the companies in the exhibition hall, and these are not development people. Some of them aren't even space people, they're just engineers. And so it could be very helpful if there's a whole rationale explaining why this is very important for society. So thank you very much for any information.
Yeah. Genio, and then Chris and
I
Shirish.
think I'll just direct you to UNOSA site. It's easy, goal by goal. There are application areas. I don't know the exact where, but if you go to UNOSA site, goal by goal, and they show a sample, and there are prints or books that already showing that. That's part of this achieving the Space 2030 agenda. So I think that's a lot has been done on that.
Chris?
That's a really good question that you raised, and I know LEAF and some of the programs they've been involved in. And we are struggling a little bit with that, but I can tell you what we're going to do about it. Certainly, if you go to our own website, it's called www.space4development, all one long word, .org. We put everything online, so all the products and the projects that we've been involved in, all the reports that we've written, some of them are financially based reports. But what we realized towards the end of our third year was that we are not presenting the information in an economically relevant way for the commercial investors that might wish to take on some of this sustainability issue. As I said at the beginning, our goal is to develop the services, but then step away, and somebody else then has to step forward and fund them. It doesn't have to be the government, it could be a new financial mechanism. So what we're looking at developing in the years 4 and 5 is what we call a sustainability hub, which will be a source of information that is brought together for the benefit of that sort of customer community to try and demonstrate it. The important thing to realize is that the satellite bit is just a small bit, and that's what we often overlook. We sort of deliver the image map and say, well, here's the service, and it isn't. We had an organization that had, and I've said it in others, a fire monitoring capability, and they were able to detect fires much, much earlier using new instrumentation technology from space. And the argument was, well, if we can detect the fires much, much earlier, we can therefore make a service out of it. The challenge was they hadn't followed it all the way through to the end user's real problem, which was they didn't have enough fire engines. So the challenge was you tell them you've got this information, but they can't use it. So you have to find the financing mechanism with the insurance sector that then addresses that challenge. When you've addressed that challenge, then you can deliver a commercial service on the back of it. So working with innovative finance communities is definitely the way to go, and I don't think we have the answer yet, but we're beginning to work out how we might get that engagement going forward.
But if you can provide us the type of elements that are useful for your customers, then we can, they can think about how it can help. Because sometimes what's missing is the need of the end user, so this could be an exchange there. I think we might have time for last question, because there's another GNF after us, yes?
I don't know if this works. Yes. My name is Chris Albrecht. I'm with the European Space Agency representing ESA at the World Bank. So I heard some keywords like inspiration, motivation, and relevance. I think, so this is all key for establishing a policy dialogue. I would add one more term, which is trust. I guess we deal with a lot of non-traditional stakeholders and end users here in the using space for development. Those people are not used to using that. They may not even care about it. They just care about the impact it delivers. So trust is key, and I think we all need to work on integrating it in day-to-day operations, right? So it shouldn't stay at the innovation stage. It shouldn't stay at the disruption stage. We need to go beyond that, right? And that's the challenge we all face, because we are kind of operating at an ad hoc basis still, all of us. We try to find good pilot cases, good studies. They work. Okay, I think we made the case, but how do we mainstream it? How do we make this day-to-day business that we don't have to discuss it anymore? It's just in the regular operations. And I think that's the challenge we face also in the programs we are trying to set up at ESA, and similarly the UK Space Agency and others. And it's not a real question, it's more a comment, but if you can address it, would be great.
Yeah, Shirish.
Yeah, I take your comment really quite relevant of my experiences. So I'm just giving an example of, there is something called International Charter Space and Major Disasters, and that helps providing satellite images during major emergencies. And we are the one promote this particular mechanism in all the countries. And I have experience from some countries When we go and tell them that this is available for you during disaster to save lives of your people, and you become authorized user of this, and even after 2-3 years after conducting several advisories at ministerial level and even building skills, they still say, but what is the security about our country when we become authorized user of that, although they are using it when disaster comes. So this is where the trust lacks, and I see that then progress doesn't happen. But there are some positive examples, like in countries like Myanmar, which is not at all spacefaring country. The ministries and the political lobby really believed in our advisories, and they incorporated policy decisions to incorporate space, basically in the areas of disaster management, disaster risk reduction. And they developed emergency operations center, they have a remote sensing unit, and then they train the manpower, and around the year of 7 to 8 years of trust and relationship, I see that countries already using technology for sustainable development and also building resilience. So I take your comment that yes, unless machinery believes and have the trust, they can't take the step ahead. This is my experience too.
Chris, how did you build trust with the end users?
I'm not sure we can yet say we've done so. I think it's a journey that we face. I think a space agency trying to deliver a space-enabled solution is naturally in a disadvantage, because there's an assumption that the organization is promoting a solution based on the use of satellites, when, of course, in our case, we're genuinely trying to find out whether it actually works. I think the UN has a key role to play in this as a neutral and trusted advisor. I think one of the questions we're often asked, and I don't think countries take enough time to think it through, is if you think it's so useful, how are you using it in your government under your basis? And show us the examples where your government is using satellite data to make effective decisions. And I don't think if I went into France and Germany, Italy, the UK, we have really crystallized how our governments are using satellite data on a daily basis for real impact. My worry might be perhaps we're not. And yet we then go and try and show why others should be using that. But the real issue for me is longevity in the partnership. If they see that we have delivered something and it works and it's gone over a number of years, which is why we wanted 5-year programs rather than 1-year programs, hopefully the relationship building builds trust in that group. There is one other element to it, which is peer acknowledgement. If you're able to show that the UN in some way has endorsed what you're doing, or the wider community in some way has endorsed what you're doing, then there's a more general acceptance. And if I can just use the platform here for a brief moment, and before I came into the room today, I received a tweet to simply confirm that the International Partnership Programme has just been awarded the Better Satellite World Award through an independent organisation to demonstrate the fact that satellites do have roles and are recognised amongst the community itself. And we need more of that publicity.
Yeah, I hope you will advertise that after. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, congratulations for that.
Just one statement, if you don't mind.
Just short statement?
Short one, yeah. As part of our mandate is outreach program, creating awareness among the decision makers. And in doing that, you need to create different applications to showcase knowing the needs in the society. We try as much as possible to showcase that, and I try to have a kind of competition amongst school students, graduate students, with regards to a particular needs of a particular society, so that we can then award prizes. So in a sense, we are trying to domesticate and trying to create awareness. And we have space clubs all over. Thanks.
We'll have to stop. Yeah.
Just one comment. I think that to indicate where the road we have to travel is still far, is we are having a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda in 2020. Space is not on the agenda. There is no reason why it isn't. If you're not trusted to be able to present in a forum, all the countries in the Commonwealth that have space as part of their program, if you get it on those sorts of programs, you build trust through that mechanism. So hit at the high points as well as the low points. And we still haven't yet reached that position.
Thanks, Chris. We have to stop because the next panel wants to start, and I can agree. As usual, it derives a bit. We started a bit later, but okay. Thank you. I would like that you thank you all the panelists, and I hope you learned something from that. We're very happy to be there, and there's still a lot to go in IAC, so thank you.